All right, thank you everyone for coming tonight. On behalf of the District 196 Community Ed Department and Trafficking Justice, we want to welcome you to our Sex Trafficking Awareness Educate Our Community event. My name is Keith Lockismo. I am the Director of Trafficking Justice, which is a local organization, and our role is to educate people and mobilize people that want to make a difference, that want to actually do something to prevent trafficking from happening, and to reach out to people who have been in the restoration process. We're all a volunteer organization. And I really want to give special thanks to Matt McCabe of Community Ed. He's running the sound room right now and his whole staff for partnering with us, giving us this auditorium, setting up all the audiovisuals. Really been a great partner for us tonight. So parents and other adults that are here, we really welcome you. We appreciate your voice and your presence to try to make a difference in your community, with your friends, and with your families. And to all of the high school and middle school students, we especially welcome you here tonight. We want to invite you to be advocates, to be part of the solution to this problem. You guys are on the front lines. And so as you become aware tonight and in the future about what's happening, that knowledge and your concern and wisdom and talking with your peers and your friends can really make a dramatic difference in preventing someone that may be lured into this lifestyle. So thank you, especially teens, for coming tonight. We really have three simple goals tonight. One is just to make people aware of what's happening in our state, in the metro area. A couple people talked to me at our table prior to coming in, and they had just heard about this. They really didn't know anything that was happening. Other people in the audience tonight may have heard quite a bit and be quite knowledgeable. I just want to let you know that this is your first time hearing about the subject. You might be shocked about what's really happening. Our goal tonight is to be tasteful. We don't want to trigger anyone with any images or any too graphic words, but we want to also, at the same time, talk about what's really happening, the reality. Only when we understand the reality of what's happening can we then begin to move forward in prevention. At the end of the evening, and some of the speakers may also do this, we want to give you hope, because this is a daunting problem. It can be overwhelming, but there's a lot of great things happening, and we together can really make a difference. So thank you for your courage in coming tonight. If you have any questions as you hear people speak tonight, we're going to be having a panel discussion for the last half hour of all the speakers, plus James Backstrom, the Dakota County Attorney, will be joining them right at the end. All right, so now I'd like to bring up Elizabeth Ancona, who is one of the major spearhead leaders for putting this event on. And Elizabeth, are you here? Yeah. Why don't you come up, and she's going to be introducing our first speaker. Welcome.
So Sergeant Grant Snyder has spent nearly 30 years focusing on investigations, advocacy, and research involving victims of sexual assault, child sexual abuse, and commercial sexual exploitation. He is a military veteran and has worked in both the public and private sectors, to include both federal and local law enforcement agencies and various nonprofits. Currently, he is a detective sergeant with the Minneapolis Police Department Special Crimes Investigation Division, where he has been investigating human trafficking and sex trafficking crimes since 2000. He is the lead investigator in all human trafficking and sex trafficking cases for the Minneapolis Police, with an emphasis on juvenile sexual exploitation. Sergeant Snyder works in close collaboration with the FBI and Homeland Security investigations, and is a former specialized deputized U.S. Marshal, as well as a former task force officer with both the FBI and ATF. Sergeant Snyder is a member of the Minnesota Statewide Human Trafficking Task Force, as well as the International Association of Human Trafficking Investigators and the National Technical Investigators Association. Quite the resume.
All right, good evening, everybody. Let's see. Oh, yep, that's me about 55 pounds ago. So I think you got the wrong speaker up here. I want to talk a little bit with you today, just cover a few brief principles about human trafficking and about what trafficking looks like here in Minnesota, here in the Twin Cities, here in the suburbs, and what we call our homes. I remember back a number of years ago when I started doing these presentations, and I remember the level of enthusiasm that I had standing before a crowd like this, and I really have not lost that enthusiasm, although I'm much older now and I feel a lot differently about the job that we have to do. I feel like we have made a ton of progress. You are going to hear from a couple of speakers tonight that I consider to be among very heroic individuals that have really led this fight, and so I'm excited to sit with you and listen to their words and see your responses to what they have to say. I'm excited about the questions that you raise. One of the realities that I hope I can share with you today, and it feels particularly penetrating for me, is that everything we're going to talk about, as much as you may have the sort of awe reaction, you know, the outrage, the passion, the shock, and all those sorts of things, we can never lose perspective that these things happen to real people. And the anchor in human suffering has left such an indelible mark on my experience as I've been working these type of cases, and it wasn't the one that I thought would be left. When I first started working these cases back, you know, going on 17 years ago, I remember the level of outrage that I had that anybody could be treated like that, and the adrenaline of, you know, staying up all night and hunting down victims and hunting down traffickers and all those things. And tonight I wasn't sure I was actually going to make it here on time because I've been out there since Sunday looking for a little 13-year-old girl, a 13-year-old girl who I recovered back in July out of a group home for sex offenders in downtown Minneapolis. And we recovered her after about 2 weeks of being gone, of being posted on Backpage. We found her. We got her into services. She's been doing very, very well. Our Safe Harbor system, our regional navigator in the East Metro, has been working with her, and she's just been doing great. Well, I found out on the heels of coming back with my family from up north that on Sunday night she ran away. And she ran away, and there was a concern she'd be back in trafficking, so I did what we do when we first lose a victim. I go to those places where we're likely to find those victims, and that's on Backpage. And sure enough, about 8:30 Sunday night, I found her on Backpage, and I found a video that was connected to the ad that she was on, and in that video it depicted her, and she was in various states of undress. Her clothing was torn, there was bruising, there was indications of duress and everything like that. Regardless of when we find this child, and I've now, since that time, myself and officers from about 5 other jurisdictions in the metro area here have arrested now 4 people. Literally on the way down, my team just arrested our 4th person in St. Paul. And she's been sold that many times, and she's always one step ahead of us. And we're bringing to bear all of the technical assistance and all of the sort of knowledge that we have, not only from us, but from the private sector. We learn a ton about, you know, interpreting a Facebook account, for example, and a call detail record, and how we work with social media. Those aren't skills that investigators like myself are just born with. These are things that we're taught from people out there, people like you that go to those jobs every day, and then you come back and you say, hey, if you want to find somebody, this is how you do it. People in the hotel and motel industry, these are the things that you want to look for. I remember years ago teaching hotel and motel people, and when they asked me to do it, I'm like, I don't know anything about the hotel industry. I've stayed at plenty, but I've never worked at one. And so I went out and I spent 3 months talking to them, and they were able to tell me precisely those factors that you looked for, that a desk clerk or a bartender or a valet would look for, that would indicate that this might be a victim of trafficking or somebody that was involved in a life of exploitation. And so this has really convinced me that our success in getting this kid, and we'll find her, I don't know how many hours it's going to take, but I'm not going to give up after I leave here. We're going to go back and we're going to start all over again, go to the next level and see where we end up. But it's all built around partnerships. And so it's in the spirit of that partnership, it's in the spirit of your involvement in all of the work that we do, recovering victims, but also in a place that you may not think about much, and that's impacting the mind of men. Because let's face it, most of the buyers of commercial sex are what? They're guys. And what do those guys look like? Well, they look a lot like me. They're middle-aged, they tend to be white, middle class, generally have a good job, although I don't know if some people would probably deny being a police officer is a good job, but they are educated, they have a family, they're married. I mean, the list goes on and on and on and on and on. They have some sort of faith tradition. If you look at this critically, if you look at this problem for what it really is, we are never, ever, ever going to erase sex trafficking and exploitation by targeting the victims. We have to focus on recovery. We have to focus on making people safe. We have to find those people that are willing to exploit an underage girl or boy or an adult woman or man. We have to track down those people that are willing to make money off of the suffering of others, right? The problem is, if we don't target those people that are buying it, we will never, ever start to scratch the surface. And that's a reality that it took me a while to come to terms with, but one that I've really sought a lot of guidance from. And frankly, where I learned so much about that was from the voices of survivors themselves. They taught me a language about this that I never understood. I would have never placed the responsibility for this massive problem in the laps of suburban men like myself. But I will tell you that over the past, well, since we've been doing Guardian Angel, since 2014, we've arrested about 385 of these guys in 3 different states. And if I include the work we've been doing with North Carolina and Texas right now, that's about double that number. And these are all men that are out there looking for juvenile sex. They're looking to purchase sex from a kid. And that's shocking. But this is going to shock you more, okay? When I started doing this, and believe me, I've arrested plenty of guys that were buying adult sex off Backpage, off street corners. Those guys demographically are exactly what I explained to you, right? They're like me, they're middle class, they're, white, blah, 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 that whole thing. When I started doing Guardian Angel and I was looking for that guy that goes, oh, you're 14? Yeah, that's cool. I'll come to the hotel. Where are you at? I thought this was going to be a different person. I thought this was going to be a guy that was a sociopath. What am I too wound up? Oh, really? Okay. Normal is not a word people use to describe me very often, so I apologize. I'm going to do the best that I can do. But the demographic that we found in those men that were out there buying juvenile sex was identical to the demographic of the men buying adult sex. Well, that's pretty shocking because I was expecting to find something completely different. I thought this was going to be the dredges of society, a massive amount of pre-criminal behavior and prior convictions and sex offenders and sociopaths, and we didn't find that. And so that's kind of the important aspect that I really want to keep coming back to, because those are people that live in our communities. Those are people that worship where we worship, work where we work. Their kids attend school with our kids and things like that. So let's talk a little bit about human trafficking, and let's talk about starting where I think we always should start, and that's what's the reality of it. You've all seen movies, and you've all read articles, and you've seen Facebook posts about what human trafficking is. And the problem is, so much of what we associate with human trafficking is what? It's like that picture right there. It's wrists bound, it's duct tape across mouths, it's people held against their will, chained to bedposts and basements and things like that. And the reality of it is, if we're out there looking for those cases, we're out there looking for people that are tied up, that are thrown in a basement, that are held against their will, so if they wanted to leave, they couldn't do it. If we look for those people, we're going to be looking a long time, and we're going to step right over the true victims and the way that victim really looks in our society. One of the things that I carried into this work was a passion for working with people that are urban poor and are living in homelessness. And I got to tell you, I am so deeply impressed and moved by the work that's being done around youth advocates that work with our homeless and vulnerable youth. That victim does not look anything like that victim right there. And when you stand in front of that victim and you try and tell them that they're another victim, that they're a victim whose hands are bound and they're thrown in, we lose all credibility because they know that's not their experience. And we make them feel like, well, wait a second, I'm not really a victim because I could leave and I didn't leave. And that's a really, really important thing to remember. Our reality needs to reflect the reality of how these victims suffer in the real world. And we ignore chains like drugs, like alcohol, that actually bind our victims more effectively than rope and chain and duct tape do. All right? One of the primary ways that traffickers right now are luring and are controlling their victims is through drugs. You guys probably read a few weeks ago about Damon DiMartino. He was a trafficker that was pimping out underage girls on party buses, and we interdicted him. He was prosecuted by Washington County. Imran Ali did an amazing job with that one and entered a straight plea to 20 years the day that that victim walked into the courthouse. And he had said the whole time, I listened to his jail calls, she's never going to show, I'm going to beat this, she's never going to show. And he was defiant and he was arrogant and all the things that we kind of think that traffickers and pimps are. The day that his trial was about to start and he saw her standing in the back of the room, he entered a straight plea. And a straight plea means they didn't offer him anything. He just pled. And that's pretty remarkable because, you know what, he wasn't getting anything special for that. The way that he controlled his victims, the way he got his victims was through the use of drugs. He dealt Molly, among some other things, and he would go to these high school parties, and he would provide drugs, and he would provide them cheap and sometimes free so that he could get people hooked into it. And then he'd separate the girls from their boyfriends, and he'd say, hey, you know what, you're really pretty. Why don't you come on down to my house sometime if you need drugs and you don't got money? That's no big deal. Come on down, I'll give you some. And he would get them down there, and eventually he would introduce this idea of survival sex. He'd say, you know what, you're really cute, we could hang together, you know, I'm giving you these drugs, and you're not, you know, I need to get something in return for that. And that's how it started, and that's how he controlled them. The other chain that binds these victims that we don't see is money. If you're a kid who's living in poverty, okay, and you have no money in your pocket and no foreseeable money in your future, think about how much that makes us as adults crazy, right? Now, if you are seeing your mom struggling, a single-parent family, or your mom and dad out of work or something like that, and all of a sudden there comes an opportunity where you can make $300 in an hour or $1,000 in a night or something like that, that becomes a very, very powerful tool that traffickers use to lure these victims in. I remember a couple years ago I pulled a 14 and a 16-year-old girl, sisters, out of a West St. Paul apartment. I was looking on Backpage one night. I still don't know what drove me to look this particular night because it was late. It was about 8 o'clock. And I was tired, and I'm looking on Backpage, and I go, you know what? That's a kid. That's a juvenile. And when that happens, you know, that light goes on, or we kind of get our second wind. And so I made the phone call. I set up a date. I drove over to this apartment. They came walking out. As soon as I took one look at them, I knew that they were kids. They got in the back of my car. I pulled out of the lot, started driving away, and gave the bus signal, and we had the squad pull in behind us. We immediately separated them. We pulled out because we were pretty sure there was a pimp following us. We knew that most juveniles have pimps. Most victims have pimps out there, right? This is the reality of trafficking. Take them down to headquarters at St. Paul PD, separate them, talk to them both, and they both told me exactly the same story. They didn't have a pimp, okay? This was the first time they'd ever done it, the first ad they'd ever posted, and I was the first caller. What are the chances of that? Talk about a little divine intervention, huh? And I said to them separately, how is it possible you guys came up with this idea if nobody made you do it? And they had to convince me because I was certain there was a pimp behind this. How did you come up with this idea? And they said, a couple years ago, we had a friend who didn't have money for school clothes, and she was poor like we are, and her mom wouldn't buy her clothes, and so she did this one day, and she made $500, and she showed up with the best-looking clothes and the best purse and all that other kind of stuff. And she said, here we are, we need money for school clothes, and Mom doesn't have it, and this is what we're going to do. We have to pay attention to that. That's a reality, folks. Would you look at that person traditionally as a victim of sex trafficking? Generally, in the traditional sense of it, if we're looking for chains, we're not going to think about that, right? And then the final thing that we need to call into the reality of what trafficking looks like out there, and the thing that I think is most difficult for people to see, certainly was most difficult for me to see. If you watch a victim interact with traffickers, and you watch a victim interact with people that are buying sex, patrons, and they're smiling, or they're having fun, or they're reacting or interacting with them like they're not scared, that makes us feel like this isn't a victim, right? Those smiles are very, very challenging for us to get around. And I train a ton of cops all over this country, and that's the big thing. And I ask them, how do you guys know if there's a victim? Well, we can tell. We can tell if they're scared. Really? You can? What if they're not afraid of what that trafficker is going to do to them right now? What if they're not afraid of their trafficker? What if they're afraid of what's waiting for them if they run back home? The first kid that I ever recovered was in 2000, and she was 16 years old, and it was a drug raid in North Minneapolis. And I remember when we went in and did the search warrant on this place, the SWAT guys, after everything was secure, called me in the basement, and they showed me a little room that was a makeshift room. And when I went in there's a mattress on the floor, and there's a kid with no pants on sitting in the middle of this mattress. Okay, and there was used condoms on the floor. There was a crack pipe there. There was dog feces. And she looked like she's about 10 years or 11 years old. She looked terrible. She was emaciated. She looked like she was, on drugs. And she was on 4 different drugs that day. Her name is Amanda. And we recovered Amanda, and Amanda told me a story about how she had come to be there. Not that day, but eventually one time, because I would recover Amanda 6 times between that day and the time she turned 18. A couple months after that first one, I kicked in another door, and there she was sitting on the steps that went up to upstairs right in the living room there. And I asked her finally, because I was frustrated, I'm like, Amanda, why do you keep doing this? Why do you keep coming back to North Minneapolis? She's from a little town in northern Minnesota, right on the shores of Lake Superior. People like us vacation there. We pay to go there, and here she lived there, and she kept coming back to this, right? And she said, why do you keep rescuing me? And I said, because I can't stand to see you victimized. I can't stand to see people mistreating you. And she said, then stop sending me home. What was waiting for her at home was a father. Her mother had died when she was 8, and so for the last 8 years, she'd been treated with every abuse and disrespect imaginable because she was sexually abused by her father and her 2 older brothers. And that started pretty much right after Mom died. In that situation, she did what any of us would do. She escaped and she ran to something else. And to Amanda, what happened to her in those North Minneapolis homes, in those basements, in those couches, in those upstairs bedrooms, was nothing even close to what happened to her at home in the company of people that were supposed to love her. I just want to say one quick thing about a victim perspective. If we don't have a way of making sure that the policies we make, the tactics that we use, and the way that we interact with victims, if that's not informed, first and foremost, by that victim's perspective, we are already going to lose. And here's how I found that out. One day I was doing, you're going to see a case, well, I found it out several ways, but one of the most important ways I found it out was a case that I did on a guy named Bernard Morris, who ran a brothel out of a South Minneapolis home. And this young victim, the 16-year-old girl, who we recovered, she's a native girl, we approached her, she told us everything we needed to know, told me and I said, well, how do I find this guy? Because she said, yeah, he runs a brothel, he's pimping out all these native girls, he pimped me out. She said he's African, and he speaks with an accent, and he drives a black Cadillac, and it's always parked right here, and it's got one of those little globe things on the dashboard, And so I'm like, well, that's pretty specific. I can find that car. So I went there and I found the car, right? A little globe on the dashboard, sunroof, black Cadillac, and I'm like, yeah, this is our car. Put a tracker on it. Head back to the precinct. By the time I got back, the car was on the move. So we are watching this track on the car. Car goes right over to the bridge over in South Minneapolis off Emerson, right? What's the bridge? It's a place for homeless kids where they stay. So my anxiety amps up, and I'm like, we got to go get this guy. Went over there, found out he's a janitor. He was American. He was not African, but he spoke with a speech impediment, so I could see how she thought that he had an accent. So we go in there with a search warrant, search his locker, arrest him, bring him down to the office. We take a flash drive out of his locker, among some other things like that, and I turn all that stuff over to my crime lab guys, and I'm sitting there, and we're in the interview room, and he's like, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know what you're talking about. I've never done that. I'm not a trafficker, blah, blah, blah. Yes, I live in South Minneapolis, but I don't know anything about this. And so I'm like, he's so adamant. I'm like, will you do me a favor, my partner, show his picture to the victim to make sure this is our guy? And I fully expected it was. And she comes back a minute later and goes, that's not our guy. I'm like, oh, okay. And so then I'm sitting at my desk trying to figure out, okay, what do we do now? How do I apologize the right way because I arrested the wrong person? My phone rings, it's his boss. Oh, by the way, tell him he's fired and he can't come back. And I'm like, hold on just a second. I think we arrested the wrong guy. Then my forensic guy walks up with the report from the flash drive and goes, dude, you're not going to believe the amount of child pornography on here. What he was doing, and it wasn't at the bridge, but it was a different place that he worked with kids, he was secretly filming girls as they were taking showers. And so we arrested the wrong guy, but we arrested the right guy, and it all worked out in the end. So I was frustrated. I'm like, how do I find Bernard? How do I find this guy? And the victim says to me, well, let me make a phone call. I'm like, what do you mean? Well, I'll call him. He'll talk about everything you need to talk about on the phone. I'm like, could it possibly be that easy? So I put her on a controlled phone call. Not every victim could do this, but she could. She made a phone call, and for 5 minutes he talked about all the money he was going to make, all the things she was going to have to do. She gave us everything we needed to know, and then we were able to arrest him. But what I learned from that is that that victim knows more than I do and more than any of us do about what it means to be trafficked, and we have to include them in our strategies. Again, with a heart toward the well-being of that victim, because not every one of them can do it, but it's important we remember that. You want to learn a little bit about what it means to be a victim, and there's several books out there, but one of my favorite, and I know her very well, is this book by Holly Smith, Walking Prey. Holly was a young woman who was trafficked. I'm not going to spoil the book for you by telling you, but it's a great book for high school students, if you're doing, or college students, if you're doing reports. She's very, very informative about what it looks like through their eyes. She talks about her experience with law enforcement. She talks about her experience with the community, and so that's a pretty good tool that you can use. Trafficking, and I think we're running out of time here, so I'm going to end after this. Trafficking is caused by a series of a couple things, right? It's caused by vulnerabilities. It's caused by the victim's vulnerabilities. Traffickers look for a set and a series of things that they can exploit. This doesn't just happen magically. They're looking for that kid that they can somehow manipulate and they can somehow coerce, whether it's through drugs, whether it's through violence, whether it's through whatever. And one thing I haven't much talked about here is the connection between violence and trafficking. One of the big things we've seen develop is this idea of a businessman pimp. I put back page ads out all the time. They're not bearing my picture, so I don't need the jokes, but I get I get why that's funny. But we put back page ads out all the time. And you'd be amazed, pretty much it doesn't matter where I do it, okay, whether it's here in the oil patch in North Dakota or Raleigh, North Carolina, I always get people that respond to that and say, hey, you're way too pretty to be on Backpage. Come work for me. I'll take you here. I'll take you there. You can keep most of the money, all this other kind of stuff. So that whole image that we have about the trafficker and the pimp that wears a floppy, furry cap and rides around a big Cadillac, that really doesn't exist anymore. And that's part of what makes this very insidious. But the thing you need to understand about violence, if a trafficking relationship lasts long enough, I guarantee you violence will start. Because love is not going to last very long when it's saturated with the kind of victimization, the kind of abuse, and the kind of exploitation that goes on here. I'm going to skip over these. I know this is bad form to go through this stuff, you guys, but I'm really out of time, and I want to get to one thing that I think you need to see, and that is, that's a Backpage ad, by the way. I know you guys have heard of Facebook, so I won't spend a lot of time there. This reaction, okay, from this pimp. Read that. I'm looking for the girl who feels ugly and thinks she doesn't fit in. If 3 girls are walking together, I'm looking for the one walking behind alone being ignored. And I'm sorry, I'm kind of reading from the side. I want the one who's afraid to make eye contact with me. I took that saying from a pimp that worked Lake Street, and he'd drive up and down in his red Charger, and he would pull up next to 3 girls, and guess who he'd pick? He'd pick the girl that looked like that. That's the one he wanted because he knew he was a good-looking dude, and he had a pocket full of money, he had a nice car, and when he pulled up next to that victim, and he said, hey, you, come here, and she didn't think that there was anything special about her, but he told her she was special, that never failed him, and that's why he did it for 15 years before we finally found out about it and we put him away. Here's what I want to leave you guys with. If he can do that, we can do that, because we know who that kid is, don't we? You see that kid in your churches, in your schools, in your neighborhood, and you know who that kid is that's vulnerable, that carries the background, that puts them in a position where they could be exploited, where they're going to feel like they don't matter, like they don't fit in. And we know who those kids are. And so it's really important to not overlook those kids. And I'm going to leave you guys with that. Thank you very much.
Our next speaker is Jeremy Darling. He is an actor, a songwriter, performer, and advocate against sexual violence. He also runs the Salvage Project, performing concerts in prisons nationwide. He's been married for 14 years to his only girlfriend, Gretchen, and together they have 3 sons, Wyatt, 7, Wilder, 4, and new baby Ren, 12 weeks. When he is not on the road, he provides music therapy in the Twin Cities for people with dementia, people on hospice care, and homeless and at-risk youth.
I think I made a mistake going after Grant, because now my blood is boiling and I'm trying to calm down. Grant's one of my heroes. I gotta talk to you afterwards, by the way, homie. What's that? Oh, how do I do? Oh, this little guy? Other way? Keep going. I don't have a slideshow. Is that? Keep going. Oh, I'm looking for my face. This is weird. There's me. Oh my God. They, I tell you what, it's a good thing they put me behind a podium here, because I tend to wander. Thank you for that introduction, and Grant, for what you shared, folks. If your blood's not boiling, we cannot help you. I'm very privileged to be here tonight. I have some very heavy things to talk about, and I want to give a little warning here. I'm going to do my very best to keep this safe. There's some things you need to know. Depending on the crowds I speak to, sometimes I cross the line. I'm going to try not to cross that line here tonight as best I can. I'm going to talk about pornography and how that ties into trafficking. But before I get into really deep, dark, depressing, horrible things, I thought I'd tell you a little bit about my story. I met my wife Gretchen when I was 17. She was 18. When I met Gretchen, she was a hot mess. She spent all of high school drunk, really from the ages of 14 up to her senior year, drinking on a regular basis. In fact, by her own volition, she drove home drunk probably 15 or 20 times throughout high school. It's about one of the dumbest things you can do, by the way, if you're a young person here, is drive drunk. It goes without saying, but she's very lucky to be alive and not in prison. And for all intents and purposes, high school was very good to my wife. She was maybe the most popular girl at Apple Valley High School, just down the road. And not because she wanted to be or because she tried to be. Gretchen just is. She just does. It's very hard to explain unless you've met her. She's the most magnetic human being I've ever met in my life. You could drop her in a remote village on the other side of the world, and she'd come out queen in a week, not even knowing the language. I don't know how she does it. I studied it for 17 years. I've tried to emulate it. I'm a victim of it. I still can't figure it out. But it did her no favors in high school. Wouldn't you know that kind of popularity isn't all it's cracked up to be? And it nearly destroyed her life. And the night we met, March of '99, we met at church of all places. She was in the process of making some very big changes in her life. She realized alcohol had a very dangerous relationship with alcohol, and that needed to change. She also did not know how to have a functional relationship with a man that did not involve sex. And frankly, alcohol and sex were exclusively combined in high school. And she knew that needed to change. I didn't know any of this, when we met. We just sort of shook hands that night, and we very quickly became best friends, which for me was a brand new experience growing up. I never had a best friend. I barely had any friends growing up. Other than my own mother, no one in my life to that point had been as kind to me as Gretchen, and that thought was not lost on me. What I wanted growing up was what my parents had. I wanted to love a woman the way my dad loved my mom. It's the best thing he's ever done for me and my brothers and sisters. And I recognize many of you in this room come from broken homes or in a broken marriage. And for that, I'm sorry. I don't know what the issues are between your parents or what might be going on in your personal life. But especially young people, I want you to understand something very important. Your parents' marriage did not have to dictate yours or your future, your relationships. But from my experience, I wanted what they had, and I decided I would wait until I met a girl that could put up with me for like 70 years. That's a lot to ask of somebody, young person. You are not that special. And by the end of that summer of '99, my dad had realized what I was slowly coming around to myself. I had fallen in love with Gretchen. And he sat me down one day and he asked me if I could live without her. He said, because if you can, you should. I thought, that's interesting. I knew the answer right away. No, if she moved away or fell in love with someone else, I would never recover. I wouldn't die, but I'd be chasing her for the rest of my life, trying to find someone like her. She'd set the bar impossibly high. So I took her for a walk on the campus of St. Thomas where she was enrolled, and I said, look, I don't want to do this with anybody else. I would like to marry you someday. If you're not interested in that, you should let me know. And I will try and move on with my life, but I needed you to know. And she did feel the same way. We got married in 2002, September 1st, 2002 at the U.S. Bank Trust Center in downtown St. Paul. There were 400 people at our wedding. No kids, 400 adults. Gretchen had 12 bridesmaids. If you've ever been to a wedding and the bride has like 4 or 5 bridesmaids, you're probably thinking to yourself, well, she must have a lot of sisters. Gretchen has 1 sister. I have 2. And now I've run out of fingers to show you how many women stood up for my wife that day, if that gives you any indication of the kind of woman that I married. Miraculously, I managed to find 12 guys to stand up for me. I remember making that list, and I kept telling her, I honestly don't think I have that many friends. I have 1 brother. And it was an amazing day, one of the greatest, truly, days of my life. We laughed and danced and ate and drank for hours. We were the last people to leave that wedding that night. It was an amazing day. We moved to Eden Prairie for a while, and then to Savage, and now we're back in East Bloomington, actually, where I grew up. Right in my old stomping grounds. I moved up to Minneapolis in 1981, or 1986. Excuse me, I was born in 81. We moved up here in 1986 in East Bloomington, there in Old Shakopee and 86th Street, right by the Mall of America. And I had a paper route when I was like 9 or 10. I don't know if it was legal or not to have a paper route at that age, but my mom would drive us around and kind of follow us in this van. And we made good money. And I remember one day I was walking, I know the exact street, the exact gutter I was walking past, and I saw something under some leaves. And I picked it up, and it was an adult film cover, a VHS cover. You guys remember what VHS tapes are? And it was, I'd never seen anything like that before. It was two women having sex and then a man in there. And I was 11 years old, and instinctively, I knew this is not something I should look at, and I stuffed it in my little bag, and I walked a couple blocks. And I was like, I gotta get rid of this. I threw it down the sewer. And porn has been chasing me and my friends for the last 24 years. I was never addicted to pornography by any stretch. It never affected my marriage, thank God, or my sex life or anything like that. But it has been chasing me and haunting me relentlessly for the last 24 years. And about a year ago, I began speaking in high schools on sexuality and pornography. And it was really at that point I began to look at it a little differently. And I said, you know what, I'm done being a guinea pig for this experiment. I did not opt into that experience at all. And I want to help change your paradigm here tonight. I'm going to start by sharing some statistics. Many of you might not realize this. Porn has taken over every corner of pop culture today. It's influenced every pop star. It's how we have Kardashians. The average age that a person is exposed to pornography today is between 8 and 11. That's today. Now, I was exposed at 11 in 1992. The most avid consumers of pornography today are 12 to 17-year-olds. The most avid consumers. The most popular forms of pornography online today, two of the most popular, most sought out keywords on all the free websites are teen and rape. So let's do the math on that, ladies. You got a world now, 8-year-old boys exposed to that kind of pornography, watching that on a regular basis for 10 years. Let me ask, what do you think happens to women in that kind of society? 88% of pornography today features violence against women. 88%. 95% of the time that a woman is abused in a pornographic video, she pretends to enjoy it. What do you think happens to women in a society where boys grow up thinking that that's how people have sex? And they're the most avid viewers and consumers of it. It has replaced sex education in our schools. Just one of the popular tube websites that have taken over the free porn websites, YouPorn, RedTube, PornoTube, Xvideo, XHamster, just one streams 6,000 videos per second. 6,000, 12,000, 18,000, 24,000, 30,000. You do the math on just how many are going to be streamed over the course of this lecture. That's one site. In 1998, there were 14 million pornographic web pages. Today, there are 2 billion. 2 billion. It is a $100 billion global behemoth. $100 billion. Let's put that in perspective. That's more money than Apple, Google, Microsoft, Facebook, Netflix, and Yahoo combined. Do you know where all of this free porn comes from? You never thought about that? You think girls in this country just wake up at 18 really horny and decide to film themselves having sex with lots of guys, put it online for the whole world to see, and no one's ever going to know their name or remember their face or give them any money? You think that's where the videos come from? Half of these videos are likely pirated from the adult film, the professional websites, illegally. What about the other half? Tonight I have to tell you where it comes from. And we'll see if you want to watch porn after that. Here in America, the land of the free, the home of the brave, where slavery has been outlawed for hundreds of years, sex trafficking, you just heard from Grant, is a massive industry, one of the most profitable industries in this country today, and it's outlawed. Prostitution is outlawed. Slavery is outlawed. The average age, by some numbers, that a girl is trafficked is 12 years old. And once her pimp has sufficiently broken in her body, which is the first thing he does, by some numbers they'll work, 20 to 50 men per day, some girls. You got daughters in here, some of you got girls in here that age. Can you imagine one day like that for your daughter? What that would do to you? What that would do to her? Your sister? Your friend? I met these girls. Grant knows a lot of these girls. You can probably verify some of these numbers better than I can. By some estimate, because we talk to these girls, we do research, we try and put numbers together. An overwhelming majority of them would tell you, oftentimes with a laugh, of course my pimp films me. And these pimps are filming these girls and they're putting these videos on Xvideo and RedTube and PornoTube and YouPorn and XHamster with their pro accounts. You can sign up just like on YouTube with a pro account and get money from the ad revenue. And every single guy in this room, and probably some of you girls in this room, have seen a video featuring an underage sex trafficking victim on a free porn website, and you didn't even know it. How do you know? How do you know that girl in that video is actually 18? Most every girl in high school today looks 18 to me. You really think pimps adhere to the We shouldn't call them pimps anymore. We should call them human traffickers. You really think they adhere to that law? Well, you know, on the websites you have terms and conditions. Before you upload, click here to agree that all performers were over 18. Check. Click here to agree that they all gave their consent. Check. Just like you clicked you were 21 when you went to the website. I recognize, guys, in society here, the society speaks out of both sides of its mouth to men. Girls want a guy that's nice and sweet and looks all that important, but when I turn the TV on, Jeremy, all I see is Justin Bieber in his underwear, or Zac Efron in his underwear, or any number of the One Direction boys behaving badly, and girls go nuts for it. So what do they want? You know what? I don't even care. I'm just going to watch porn and play video games and live in my parents' basement. And it would be funny if it weren't happening around this country. Our young men are abandoning relationships for pornography. We have neuroscientists and neurodoctors all over this country, psychologists, psychiatrists, child psychiatrists, every corner of the medical industry coming together now, desperately begging any industrialized country to reconsider the logic behind handing the most violent pornographic images ever known to mankind into the hands of a child and asking him to grow normal. You're asking yourself right now, how could this be? There's a science behind it. Did you know that? I'm very pro-science, and there's a science behind this. Now we have 10 years of data showing what pornography does to your brain. So let's make it simple. Little 8-year-old boy Tommy gets his hands on some porn. Maybe his brother showed him or his friends at school. He will never forget that picture as long as he lives. I can still remember that VHS tape like it was yesterday. Drugs, coke, heroin, crack, they leave your system eventually. Memories never leave. I'm stuck with that picture for the rest of my life, and there's nothing I can do about it. And at 10, 11, 12 years old, when Tommy starts going through puberty, he's going to go back to that picture just because he's curious. And in that moment, his brain is going to reward him with a little drop of dopamine to the amygdala, the feel-good center of his brain, and he's going to get an erection. And he's going to remember that moment, and he's going to go back the next day and the next day, all the while hiding, just like I did. You know why? Because even as a child, even though no one told me what pornography was, I knew this is wrong, and I don't want anyone to know. And this goes on for months or years, until one day, the stuff he's been looking at suddenly doesn't seem so exciting, and his brain is saying, Tommy, I'm bored, and I'm not going to give you an erection again until you give me something new. So Tommy goes to one of these tube websites, and I hate to do this. This is as far as I'll go tonight, I promise. And he starts clicking around some of the categories. These are real categories on these websites. Extreme brutal gangbang. 18 and abused. Teens crying. Boys, let me just tell you something in this room, guys. I'm an actor. It takes an experienced, gifted actress to be able to cry on command. If you see a girl crying in a video, in a pornographic video, she's crying for a reason. But in that wonderful moment, for Tommy, his brain is going to reward him. And he's going to get his erection back. And deeper and deeper and deeper he goes. Till finally he gets in bed with a real girl, only to find out, much to his horror, in that one terrifying moment, that his brain doesn't know what's going on and will not communicate to his appendage the way it has been. It's called porn-induced erectile dysfunction. Today, 26% of men under the age of 40 have erectile dysfunction. In the early 1900s, it was less than 1%. In the 1990s, it shot up to 7%, seemingly out of nowhere. What happened in the 90s? And now here we are today, 26%. Let me ask you, where does it stop? In the 1970s, if you wanted to see a pornographic film, you had to go to a movie theater, buy a ticket, show a valid driver's license that you were 21, sit in that theater with other people, and watch what are now NC-17 rated movies on Netflix. Then the 80s came around, and if you were under 21, you had some options. You could steal a magazine from a gas station, or swipe your parents' credit card and order a VHS tape. Then the 90s came around. Some guy named Tim invents the World Wide Web, and now you can just sit at the computer and type in all kinds of words like sex, and naked, women, and all sorts of pictures would come up, albeit very slowly with our 56K modem dial-up. And now today we have streaming broadband, 24/7 unfettered access to hardcore pornography. What could possibly go wrong? But let's say Tommy's not there yet. Let's say everything works the way it's supposed to. He's going to find out then in that one horrifying moment that she doesn't like all that violent things he's been watching, and she'll run screaming from the room. Assault, assault. And he's like, what did I do wrong? He's going to have to get it somewhere, so you know what he'll do? He'll go on to Backpage. And he'll find a girl he can pay to let him do what his girlfriend won't let him do. Porn is creating a generation of buyers like we have never seen in this country. A young generation of buyers. It is fueling the demand. I would argue fueling the demand unlike anything else. Perhaps the mother of sex trafficking is pornography today in the hands of children. And you can imagine what these boys are wanting to do to these girls that are trafficked. I don't want that future for my sons. I don't want that future for your sons, for your daughters. I can speak to the boys for just a second, guys. The world does not need more low-quality men. We have enough of them in the society today. The world is as bad as it is because there are too many bad men running amok, and not enough good men like the one I see in this room, perfectly qualified to stand up and do something about it. I mean, what are you waiting for? You're going to have to decide now what kind of man you want to be, or porn will decide it for you. It is dictated now two alternate futures. One where you cannot function with a real woman, or one where you will have to go out and buy another woman and convince yourself that there's nothing wrong with it. Demand is fueled by men that have watched so much pornography they're convinced that a girl would never sell herself unless she didn't enjoy it. That a girl wakes up at 15, 14, 13, wanted to have sex with a lot of guys because she enjoys it. It has rewired the neurons in our brain, and I've been working tirelessly to try and undo the knots in my own brain and get back some semblance of normalcy in a society that is drowning in pornography. Girls, if you're with a guy that thinks there's nothing wrong with porn, you should break up with him. Porn is a symptom of a much greater problem in our society, which is the dehumanization of people. A woman on a screen is not a woman. She's pixels. She's ones and zeros regenerated by the computer from a video taken God knows when. She's not a woman anymore. She's not a person anymore. When you take away a person's humanity, what is left? What is left? Nothing. Nothing but an object. In fact, if you sit a man down and you put those brain scanner hats with all the lights, and you put those little things on his temples, and you turn the machine on, and you show him a picture of a rock, a little spot lights up in his brain that identifies objects. You show him a picture of a naked woman, and that same spot lights up that identifies objects. I've never met a girl that wants to be seen as less than human. If you're with a guy that asks you to text him or Snapchat him a naked picture of yourself, you should break up with him because he's a coward, and that's what cowards do. But here we are in society. Listen, folks, I spoke at a middle school last year to 400 seventh graders, trying to address the problem of sexting in that middle school. We have 11-year-olds sharing videos of themselves doing all manner of things and showing them around, and there are unbelievable laws prohibiting that. They're called child porn laws, and it's just a common thing in every school in America. And society speaks out of both sides of its mouth to women too, as these girls are convinced at a very, very young age that they are nothing but sexual objects. These perfectly plastic Kardashian celebrities, I don't mean to pick on the Kardashians, but they're a pretty big target. With their perfectly plastic bodies, surgically enhanced, airbrushed on the cover of every magazine, working out 4 hours a day with LA's top trainers, eating perfectly proportioned organic foods, living in a bubble in LA, turn around and tell the girls in our society with a straight face, love your body. Oh, all bodies are beautiful. You don't have to look like me. Let's celebrate women's bodies. Here's a picture of me on Instagram without any makeup. Aren't I brave? They think you're stupid. They would never go back to looking like you, and you could never look like that without synthetics and money, which should tell us something. Here we are in society today, after thousands of years of not having porn. The only way to be beautiful is to synthetically enhance your body. If that's the case, do we even know what beauty is anymore? I don't think we have any idea what it is. It's gone. Kim Kardashian's body type, the porn body type, was not beautiful 30 years ago, and it'll be something even more extreme 30 years from now. And there you are, all through time, just chasing it like a dog, chasing a car. And you wonder why every day you post those selfies on Instagram, but you still hate your nose, you still hate your chin, you still hate your weird forehead, the weird shape of your head, the ears, your earlobes, you hate your boobs, you hate your body, you hate your butt, you hate your thighs, and you twist and contort yourself in the mirror, and you use those little filters and the little touch-ups to try and make yourself look beautiful, hoping you'll get just enough likes to satiate that need for one more day. And it goes on and on like that as we chase the pornification of America, an ideal that's not even real. It's happening on both sides. It is devouring our children, and it's in every one of your homes. It's in your pocket right now, or your purse, on a little phone. So let me ask a question. In the 1970s, we had Bow Chicka Wow Wow mustache porn. And today, it's rape porn, prolific rape porn on these free sites. Where do you go after that? As a society, where does it stop? Do you think it's just going to stop? We're a year away from a functioning sex robot. We're 1 year away. And there are people out there advocating for that, hoping that will end trafficking. I hate to break it to you ladies, but all of the sex robots being built today are female. What do you think happens to women in a society where men don't even need them anymore to have sex? Where they have a woman that won't say no, that won't cry, but that really can't do what a real woman can do. Do you think that's going to end trafficking, or do you think that's going to fuel it even more? We are racing towards an end. I believe we're at a precipice, and I'm asking us tonight to step back, to go back in time with one very simple solution. Don't watch porn. I know some of you are thinking to yourself, I don't know if I can do it. I watch it every day. I didn't think it was that big of a deal. I was going to go home and watch it tonight. Now I'm not so sure. And now you're going to go home and maybe turn it on, but you're going to see my face in the reflection of that computer telling you all these statistics, and you're going to have to second guess yourself. I have 2 filters on my phone. I have 2 on my home Wi-Fi. I even set the parental controls on my cable that I can't really figure out how to unset. I don't care if you guys think I'm crazy. I mean, clearly I don't care what you guys think about me at this point. I want it out of my life. I want it out of my boy's life. I want it out of my wife's life. This woman has had 3 C-sections for me. She has a condition where she'll die if she gives birth naturally. She has voluntarily had her body ripped open 3 times to bear my children. In exchange, I gave her my sexuality exclusively for the rest of my life. I felt she earned that. It was the least I could do. But I don't want her laying awake in bed at night, wondering if she's being compared to any of the thousands of women, every shape, every size, every race, that I could have at a moment's notice from the comfort of my own couch. It's not the same. It'll never be the same. And it's destroying us. So how do we do that? What filters do I use? That's a great question. I'm going to give you a couple. I'd highly recommend you write these down. Or you can come talk to me afterwards. OpenDNS. OpenDNS.com. It's completely free. You do not have to be tech savvy to set this up. They will give you step-by-step instructions. It's on the router level. Every one of you has a router in your house. If you're using Xfinity or Comcast, you're going to have to buy a new router. You can get them for like $20 on Craigslist. Xfinity and Comcast, frankly, one of the biggest offenders of pornography in this country, and they're completely ignoring it. OpenDNS.com. Use their Family Shield. It's free. I actually pay $20 a year. You know what I did? I blocked Google from my house. Remember what I said earlier? I'm done. I'm done being a guinea pig for these people. I do not trust their safe search as far as I can spit. I blocked Google, Yahoo, and Bing from my house using OpenDNS tool. It took me 5 minutes. You just click a little, once you add your IP address to their system, which again, they make it very easy to do, look folks, I will come over to your house for a nominal fee. And I will set it up for you. I'm dead serious. I'm doing this for folks. It's very simple to do. But that's at the Wi-Fi level. What about your devices? What if your kid just tops off on 4G? Well, then they're around that system. That's when you need some app control, and I would highly recommend NetSanity. NetSanity. Or Funamo. Fun-A-M-O. Funamo. Fun-A-M-O. Something like that. Those two things can be installed on your applications, Android or iOS, on your iPhones. Frankly, if it were me, I'd just get rid of Apple stuff altogether. They're doing a very poor job at taking care of your kids. And you can set up and monitor the device usage. You can monitor what they can or cannot do. I have blocked all internet from my my oldest son, Wyatt, his Kindle. He can't get on any of that stuff. My kid's going to grow up in a whole different world. I don't trust the internet or Google or Facebook to raise my kids, or to not display horrible things to them when I know horrible things are being done on their websites all day long and they're not doing anything about it. You need to get tools in your house. If you're a school administrator, I can come help you. I can talk to your IT team. I can tell you to get things set up at a school level, to get it off your tablets. I understand the value of kids having tablets in schools. There's some great value to those things. They're using them for porn. How do I know that? A middle school teacher told me. I didn't even ask him. Oh, you wouldn't believe the stuff we found on these sixth graders. I said, what? What? I got to live with this stuff. Grant has to live with these memories. I don't have the stomach for what Grant does. But we can help our children by starting there. Folks, I just want to say one thing before I close. You may not have known these things tonight, okay? You can plead innocence, but you know them now. We cannot do this alone, okay? Whether you wanted to be or not, I knight you as advocates in the cause. You have got to do something. Some of you might be thinking, not my kids, not my house. I got good kids. Good kids, bad kids, it doesn't matter. That's the thing about pornography. It is completely colorblind, age blind. It has no prejudice. It will come after anybody. It's in your house. It's completely accessible with one word. Please consider that tonight, and please stick around afterwards to ask some questions if we don't happen to get to them up here on the stage. Folks, thank you very much for taking the time to listen to me, and I want to apologize if I offended anybody. I did the very best I could. I went light on you guys tonight compared to some other places I've been, but I'm trying my best to help you guys understand the nature of the war we're against, and one of my passions is in the demand for human trafficking by cutting off the source, and one of the greatest sources is pornography. If we can get a generation of boys to stop watching porn and stop, especially violent pornography, which is eventually where they'll land, there's a very good chance we can get them to stop buying human beings for sex. Thank you guys very much.
Thank you so much, Jeremy. Our next speaker is Miss Haley King. Haley survived 6 years of involvement in the commercial sex industry. Upon exiting the life, she earned a Bachelor of Science from Colorado State University in Human Development and Family Studies and moved to Minnesota, a state gaining a reputation for tackling the sex industry head-on. King offers her services as a consultant on program development, policy initiatives, and youth education in an effort to cultivate communities where people maximize their potential, construct meaningful lives, and live with integrity. King also offers customized trainings and presentations to a variety of audiences. She previously worked with the Ramsey County Attorney's Office to educate and raise awareness of commercial sexual exploitation through providing over 50 trainings across the state of Minnesota. Prior to joining the RCAO, she served as a youth counselor and group facilitator for sexually exploited girls at a therapeutic group home in Minnesota from 2014 to 2016.
So I'm going to be talking tonight from a totally different perspective than what you just heard. I was in the sex industry for 6 years, from age 19 to 25. So what perspective I bring is from having been exploited, been in the life, and having gotten out 8 years ago and stayed out for the past 8 years. I got out of that life, I went to college, and I stayed out, and I've worked at a group home to help other people get out, because it's really hard to get out and stay out. So that's what you're going to hear about today, is to understand this industry from someone that's been in it. I graduated in 2013 from Colorado State with a degree in Human Development and Family Studies because I wanted to help people understand what they're living for and how to live for it, and why we turn out the way we do, and what you have choice over and what you don't have choice over. So I graduated CSU with all that intention, and applied to places across the U.S. to help people get out of the sex industry. Applied at different programs and organizations helping people get out. Minnesota is one of like 2 states that cares at all about helping people get out and stay out. Other places want to lock us up, or they don't mind if we wind up dead on the side of the road because we're just whores after all. But Minnesota really cares a lot about people that have been exploited, and has funding and money towards helping people get out and stay out. So I worked at Heartland Girls Ranch for 2 years. Which is in Benson, Minnesota, which is 2 hours west of the cities, where girls from all over Minnesota, one from Apple Valley, Minnesota, are sent if they've been recovered from the sex industry and they don't have a safe home to go home to. They go to this place one place that they can go to is Heartland Girls Ranch to heal from what they've been through. So some of what I share today, it's going to be fast. I apologize to the interpreters. Speaking in Spanish, I'm trying to go slow right now, but I know that it's going to go fast because I have too much to say, so I apologize ahead of time for throwing you guys off. But so some of the stories I share aren't just my own. They're from girls that I've worked with that are 12 to 18 from all over Minnesota. And what else? And then, anyhow, that's just about me. I'm going to start with this slide about survivors, though, because I could like tell you more about me, but that's a waste of time, so I'm skipping that. But yes, I'm like a big deal. But then, thank you guys. But then, so this quote is about Holocaust survivors. It's a guy that researches resiliency, and I'm obsessed with what makes people resilient and what makes people crack. And so I read everything I can about resiliency and what. Anyhow, this researcher wrote an article. He researches Holocaust survivors and writes all about them. So this quote is pulled from that. I'm not comparing the Holocaust to the sex industry, and I just have to be like super unbelievably clear that the sex industry is not comparable to the Holocaust or slavery or anything, in my opinion. You shouldn't compare things like that because it's going to offend somebody. But the quote is about people who have survived something that you'll see why I'm using this quote. There's a reason I'm using this quote to talk about survivors. But please don't go home thinking I'm comparing the sex industry to the Holocaust. We talk about the Shoah, which is Holocaust, as though everybody had pretty much the same experience. I want to bring home to people that that is a mistaken idea. People experienced very different things, all of which are lumped to get under the label of Holocaust or Shoah. But that's an incredibly wide diversity of experiences to which an incredibly wide diversity of people responded in an incredibly wide, diverse way. So you cannot talk about survivors or victims as an undifferentiated lump. They're not. And I brought that quote into play in my presentations when I was mainly training people who work with survivors of sexual exploitation. But I keep it in here for this audience so that you know that there is no one look of what this industry looks like. There is no one experience of what this industry feels like. And based on what you come to the table with, it affects how you interpret what you're going through. And then based on what you leave an experience with, and what's like tools and resources and the way your brain works, all of that affects how you process and how you internalize and how it affects you and what you think of what you've been through. Some of the girls that I worked with at the ranch, at Heartland Girls Ranch, a therapist would say, oh, such and such and such and such, totally trauma, totally traumatized you. That's a big traumatic event in your life. And the kid's like, no, dude, that was not a big deal. I'm fine with that. Like that, it doesn't even faze me. And you have to take that into account, that what might faze you may not faze the person next to you. What might be really simple for you might be like unbelievably painful for somebody else. So when you, for those people that hear about some people's involvement in the sex industry and they're like, oh, I love what I do and it's like the best job ever. First of all, yes, there are some people that love what they do in the sex industry. There's like 4 of them in the whole world. But otherwise, there are people that have had different experiences in it, and sometimes they might be like, I'm proud of what I've survived, and let them be proud. That is, not everybody is traumatized and like I'm a poor victim in a way, in that kind of way. Some people, it is a step better than what their childhood was like. So anyhow, don't, if you hear today's presentation, if you watch a movie about this stuff, if you read a book about this stuff, please don't ever assume that you know what everybody's been through if you have read a book on it or something, because we really are so, I've even changed my own thoughts of what I've been through. I feel differently about it now than I did when I first got out of the industry. So even though one individual survivor can change over time. Okay, a little bit about my life. From age 0 to 19, I was born to 2 really well-educated parents. Both were chemical engineers, and both my grandparents on my mom's side were chemical engineers. So like, it's just in the family to be smart, you know. And here I am, but I'm just kidding. So I'm obviously not that smart. I've already demonstrated in like 4 ways. But so my mom is phenomenal. My brothers are unbelievable. I grew up with great friends. I grew up with a great education. I grew up traveling a little bit, but like more than Minnesotans sometimes travel. And I grew up on the East Coast in the suburbs. When I drove down to Apple Valley, I realized I grew up in a place just like Apple Valley, because it like looks the same to me as where I grew up. I'm sorry for the breathing. That happens. You guys are so much fun. This is not going to work because I'm going to end up totally not going on. Okay. There's way more fun things to talk about, though, I can tell you that. But so I grew up in the East Coast, and I moved to the West Coast, and I went to a private Catholic university where I totally didn't fit in because I just wasn't as rich as everybody else at that school was. And I got in. Oh, wait, I skipped the rest of this. Okay, sorry. A little bit more about before I tell you about college. I also grew up with divorced parents. I don't know if you guys know parents that like cannot be civil. It doesn't matter how mature you think these people are. They won't act like adults with each other for some reason, and they hate each other, and they like fight constantly, and they put their kids between, and it's like a big mess. That's my parents. They couldn't figure out how to have a clean break. So it was really horrible growing up, trying to help them get along and understand why the other one was doing whatever they were doing. And I protected my brothers a lot. I took care of my brothers a lot. I also grew up with a lot of childhood sexual abuse, which I won't get into any detail on, you don't have to worry, but I do put it on here and basically make it public knowledge, because it's so, it helps me understand how my life turned out the way it did. Because from a very young age, it's called dissociation. I wasn't connected to my body because it had been through things that I didn't want to go through, so I left my body while things were happening to it. And it's called dissociation. It's a psychological survival skill. It worked very well for me most of my life. But so by the time I turned 19, if you guys touch your fingernail, boss. These fingernails are boss fingernails right here, just so you guys know. But if you touch your finger, you can't see them, but they're amazing. If you touch your fingernail and you feel how like, you know you're touching yourself, but there's no nerve endings there, that's like how my body is today still, and was when I was 19. So there's no connection to it. I don't know if there ever will be, I don't know, but I'm not connected to it. So I think childhood sexual abuse really skews what a person thinks is normal sexually and what is acceptable sexually, because to me, by the time I was introduced to the industry, I was like, basically the way I saw it is this is trash. Okay, so if somebody wants to pay me and I give them trash, Like, why not? Why wouldn't you do that? If you pick trash out of a trash can and give it to somebody and they give you a couple $100, I guarantee you, you will go find trash out of another trash can and give it back, give it to them again. So that's how I understood the industry when I was, anyhow. Depression and bipolar and low self-esteem. Low self-esteem, I think, is everyone. Depression and bipolar, for me, that made it overwhelming to think about trying to be an adult and function. Getting out of a prestigious high school where everyone's going to like rock the world with their life. I felt like, oh darn, that's the filter, did you hear that filter? Oh darn, I have to function consistently every day to have a job, and so I'm never going to fit into the regular world and get a regular job because I can't function consistently every day. And I apologize to those of you who have already witnessed that I don't function consistently every day. But it's hard, it's overwhelming for people with mental health issues to try and fit in, to think about fitting into a society that doesn't quite support people with mental health issues. So that's my, where did my clicker go? That's my 0 to 19, and I was born female. All of these play a part into how I wound up in the industry. On the inside, that's physical outside stuff. On the inside stuff, I'm a caring person. These are qualities about me. Nurturing, loyal, I forget what they are. Tough, resilient, powerless, filthy, empty, dead inside, and desperate. And those are qualities I feel like I grew up with my whole life, but I'm sure that some of them I wasn't born with, but I developed because of my life. But put all of these qualities together, be the most caring, think about the most caring person you know, think about the most hardworking person you know, think about the most resilient and tough, like someone who's got grit, who can handle anything and live through it. Like, put all that together, you have a perfect candidate for the commercial sex industry, because you have to survive all sorts of crazy stuff. You have to cater to everybody else's needs. What do you need? What do you need? How can I help you? What do you need from me? And you put yourself second. So all of these qualities really set me up to, as soon as I was exposed to the industry, which is what I'm about to get into, it fit. It was like, here's where I belong. I got in because I met a guy in college, my first month there. I met a guy who I fell in love with in that first month. And he was like, awesome. He listened to everything about me. Which obviously I like people listening to me, and he listened to everything about me, and he cared, and he said, oh my gosh, that stuff should never happen to you. He listened to some of my childhood stuff, and he's like, that should never happen to you. I will never let that happen to you again. So then now I'm feeling protected, and I'm feeling listened to, and I'm feeling important and special to him, and I thought to myself, he has dreams. He wants to be like a real estate investor, a pro football player, and a music producer. And this was back when we were 19. And I thought to myself, that's what he wants, and he cares about material stuff, so I can make money by doing this industry stuff and support his dreams, and somehow that, in my mind, meant that he'll love me forever because nobody else has done that for him. So it was a way, I thought, of sealing the deal on my, a love life or something, to have a great man. It made a lot of sense at the time that that's how you get a great man. Having sex with all the other men. But anyhow, it really did make sense at the time. So at the same time of meeting him and falling in love with him and wanting to make his dreams come true, make him lots of money, I was given a business card to do like modeling or dancing or something at a Foot Locker, buying a pair of tennis shoes. The cashier guy gave me a business card, and I looked at it and I was like, okay, what is this? And I called it later that day. It was a girl who looked just like me, a few years older than me. She was a student at the same school, and she ran an escort service, which is technically legal if escorting does not include touching. Escorting is when you are a companion for somebody. However, just like the small text at the end of a letter, like the secret notes that they don't want you to really know that you're signing your life away to, nobody is paying you to be a companion. That's not a real job. In the 6 years that I was in the sex industry, and up to 10-ish calls I averaged on every single day, maybe one in those 6 years was to be someone's companion and just accompany them to dinner or something. But anyhow, that's how I got in. This girl had an escort service. She explained to me how it works. sounded harmless to me. It sounded like taking trash and giving it to somebody and them giving me money. I was like, sure, like, why wouldn't this be great? And I had no idea that I'd be in it for 6 years. I thought I was going to be in it for like a year. This guy was going to like invest in real estate. We had a whole plan to like get in and out real quick, which a lot of people I think these days think they're just going to get in the industry, make some money real quick and get right out, or only take a call like once a month and regulate themselves like that. And I just want you guys to know you can get in very naively and with a very good intention to get in and get out real quick. And it's not that simple, and it doesn't work that easily. You can't usually get out that quick. You don't usually want to get out that quick. And then when you want to get out, you can't. So we have a slide about that later. So I will get into that later. How other people get in, though, in Minnesota, I feel like you guys might want to know, because it's your kids. It's your families. The girl from Apple Valley, she actually fell in love with a guy also who ended up becoming a cocaine dealer for her. And she then needed to feed her cocaine addiction or whatever, like fund her cocaine addiction. And he was like, well, I know how you can make money if that's what you need to do to get the drugs you want. So he was her boyfriend / drug dealer / trafficker. And she, to this day, probably wouldn't have a negative thing to say about that boyfriend, trafficker person in her life. Her dad was a preacher, minister, and she thought it was just like a normal dating relationship thing. Like, sorry, they were dating. I don't know if I mentioned that. That he dealt her cocaine. They also dated. I don't know. That's like a normal relationship these days. It's normal for a lot of kids to grow up thinking that posting ads on back pages is like a normal income opportunity. I don't know. And then they're a team. They don't think of it like a pimp and these are my girls or whatever. They think of it like we're a team. Okay, other girls in Minnesota, some girls, their cousins know how to do it. If like Grant said, if someone knows how to do it, and your friend knows how to do it, how to post an ad on Backpage or something, as soon as someone knows how, they think they're helping their friend out. Like, oh, I know how we can make money. I feel like I'm going to skip through that actually because I know Grant touched on that. So it's just, I guess I want to stress how normal this is becoming. Posting ads, getting money this way, all the websites that, not just Backpage, but all the websites you can go to post ads and meet people on for intimate types of encounters. It's so easy to get into this industry without knowing. A lot of the girls that would go to the ranch would never say that they are in the industry. They don't think they are in the industry, and it's just like the Kim Kardashians. People say nobody grows up saying I want to be a prostitute. No, but they grow up saying I want to be Kim Kardashian. And the problem is they don't translate in their head what does that actually mean and look like. Yes, you're going to be sold for your body. What does that feel like? People don't think all that through. They just think I want the glamour and the attention. When I was in the life, the glamour and the attention, that was fun on the days that it was fun. It's all the other days in between that aren't always so much fun. I'm going to kind of skip through. When I say parents, just so you guys know why do I have parents up there, some parents will exploit their children. And it's not just parents that are like, I don't care about my kids. I'm going to do whatever I want. It's not just like those weird parents that were like, why do they have kids? It's parents that are probably, some of them doing the absolute best they can. And I don't know what that accent was, by the way, you guys. That was just, yeah, I'll work that one out. Some parents, like one mom from one of the girls from the ranch, one mom left a partner, like it wasn't the daughter's dad, it was like a stepdad. And she left him because he was abusing the daughter. So she's like, I'm gonna take my daughter, we're gonna leave. I think he was raping his stepdaughter, which is the mom's kid. So the mom's like, let's go, honey, we're gonna go move out. They moved out into some probably not ideal situation. They moved out into some quick fix apartment situation that was a place to go to get out of the home that the stepfather was having sex with the kid. They left the house, they left the situation, they found this new apartment, and the landlord wanted the mom to give him services, sexual services, in accompaniment with the rent, so like money and sex stuff. And then he's like, well, actually, and the mom was like, this is protecting my daughter. I will do anything. I need to keep my daughter's out of that situation. She's finally not cutting her arms anymore. I'm feeling like at least she's safe. So fine, you want a blowjob every now and then? Sorry, that's what it was. I'll give you one. And then the landlord said, you're not my type. I like your daughter. I want your daughter. But all he wanted was a blowjob from the daughter. And the reason I'm using these words is because it's like necessary for the story to make sense. The mom thought, I don't know what to do. I can go back to the partner I was with before, the ex-husband guy that I was with before, who's raping my daughter. I can go back to him and all of that. Or I can ask my daughter what she wants to do. She's 15 and been thinking for herself for a long time now. Trying to take, so like the mom's trying to do the right thing. She doesn't know what to do. She doesn't have great options. And now her daughter has to give blowjobs to this landlord guy, which sounds horrible, but in a mother, and I was a mother at one point, from a mother's perspective, when you think about two options and they both suck, you really do think what sucks, like what's a little bit better than the other. Maybe this is something we all can feel, relate to right now, is what's the lesser of two evils or whatever. And so the mom is considered a trafficker. That is how her daughter got in the sex industry. However, before we blame and point fingers at anybody, it's like a recurring theme in my presentations, before you point the fingers and blame anybody, please take 2 seconds to consider that you might have no clue what happened in their life before that got them to that point. And like, what is their alternate choice compared to what you see the choices that they're making? Maybe they don't have a better one. Okay. And kids, really honestly, are growing up these days saying, I want to be in this. I want to do this. It feels independent. You feel like you can take care of yourself. It's an adventure. You definitely feel like a grown-up if you're a kid. You feel like a grown-up. If you're a grown-up, you feel young and wanted still. So it's appealing to the kids because they feel older and more mature. And it's appealing to adults because we feel like people still like us even though we're old. That's really how it feels from a female perspective. That's what gets people involved. It just is super normal these days. I thought I took this slide out, sorry. Does it really happen here? That Pretty Woman movie is totally fake. For those of you who know what that movie is, that doesn't happen. That's why it was a bestseller and there never was a sequel. Everything else that sells that well, they have sequels to. They don't have a sequel to this because it doesn't happen. It's not real. For those of you who don't know that movie, it's like with this girl in the industry and she meets this wonderful man who buys her for the week and like they fall in love and it's just this great week. No. Sorry. The men that did buy me that were nice weren't that nice. Like they're nice, but they're not nice enough that they, like you're not going to fall in love with someone who bought you. You don't fall in love with that. No matter how nice they are. In fact, the more nicer they are, the more nauseating they become. So anyhow, that doesn't happen. It also, the Taken movie, which is a movie about like a hostage rescue type kidnapping type situation, that does happen, but it's not like the common thing that's all over the place. Like, yes, it does happen. Yes, we still need people to like be finding those girls and kids and people, and it's just not how it looks on a day-to-day. Your friend, like that's not what you'll probably encounter in your life, unless you're Grant Snyder or a cop. You're probably not going to come across the kidnapping situations. But you will come across a lot of people who know how to post ads on Backpage and other websites like that. The appeal of small towns. I put this slide in for you guys. This is special just for you. Your girls are fresh, naive, wholesome, and I should have said often white. But your girls are fresh and naive and wholesome, and every person that I know that's in the industry that wants to find victims to work for them, clients, girls to work for them, where they recruit these people from are places like this, where your kids are healthy, like they're not like emaciated and like dying. They're healthy, they're fresh-faced, they have those rosy cheeks from being outdoors in the winter. They talk like me. All of that is worth so much money in this industry. Men pay a lot of money for that compared to people who don't look like me or don't sound like me. If you grew up in the city and you're a little tougher than I am, because I'm not that tough. I'm tough. But if you grow up and you come across like you're tough, that's the difference. Come across like you're tough, you're just not worth as much in this industry. So your kids are just like super valuable people. Okay, let me clarify. I talk how I think in my head, and in my head I know I don't value people over other people. But when I say that your kids are really valuable people, I don't ever mean that that other kids aren't. I just mean that the industry will pay money for your kids, and the industry won't pay for someone who looks a little tougher and comes across like they've got a rougher life. They're just not worth as much in the industry. I put on a brown wig and my phone stops ringing. I'm not worth as much as a brunette. I'm not trying to say that I'm not worth as much, but my phone won't ring. The other thing about small towns is cops, they aren't always onto it yet or looking for it yet or aware of it yet. And so this industry moves wherever the cops haven't caught on. I remember when I worked I was in San Diego. I worked in San Diego, San Francisco, Arizona, Baltimore, and DC, and Vegas some. And all the places I went, anytime there was like stings going on, like the officer stings, and anytime that the government changed and certain people were in office, it suddenly became like a big issue. And whenever it became a big issue, sex trafficking became a big issue in the town, that was time to leave that town and go work somewhere else, because you're just not going to have a good experience in that town. Either you're going to get bitter buyers. Bottom line is just a bad experience. The buyers that buy you have dealt with cops and stuff in the towns that cops are cracking down, and the buyers get more nastier and like, I don't know, they just get nastier. So your whole experience altogether in towns that law enforcement becomes active in are towns that we leave. We go somewhere else. There's less competition. So if I was a trafficker and I wanted to sell my products, I would go to a town where there's not a lot of competition. I personally never worked in New York because I thought to myself, I can never compete in New York because there's too many people. Like I'm not pretty enough. I don't have it. Like I'm not good enough to make it in New York. So like I would come to places like this because I felt like you'd all call me. That's really how I thought in the industry. Things have changed. But girls aren't always accepted back in communities like this. And I say girls, I should change this, people aren't always accepted. If a community found, I had to do a lot of making sure I was okay with saying the Apple Valley thing, because I don't ever want somebody to, I think it would suck to be in the industry and come from a small town, because you would, everyone would know your business. And it's going to be very hard. If I came from Apple Valley and I came back to Apple Valley and I was a speaker like this and people know about my life and people knew about my sex life and stuff, I'd probably have a really hard time finding a man to settle down with, who would respect me and treat me like beautifully. That'd be really hard because he'd know all the men in the town that he goes to church with who I've had sex with. Like that would just be awkward and hard. And so, and a lot of families, when the girls would come to the ranch from smaller towns, a lot of the families, because of, I don't know, the conservative nature of the town, they wouldn't be welcome back in their home, like in their own home, because it would somehow disrespect the family or make the family look bad. This is a really awkward situation. Okay, because I know I have a lot of slides that have a lot of writing, and that's not going to work for this setup. So I might move this a little bit and skip through some of the slides. Okay. I don't know. This is basically saying this industry, like as Jeremy has said, is where's my timing at? How am I don't know. Okay, this is great. Jeremy said how normal this is becoming, and like this, like your kids will grow up in this culture if you don't, and the kids that are in the room, you guys will grow up thinking sex is something that you can buy and sell, and is something that just physically feels good, unless you like actively choose to think of it differently or play your cards differently. If you grow up doing stuff sexually, I guess you could say, I don't want anybody to feel as though if you grow up doing stuff sexually and then one day you wake up and you're like, oh God, I'm done. I don't want to be that. I don't want to do that. I feel sick about it, whatever. I want to like drive home how you can build a new identity even if you've had plenty of sex. You can build an identity based on consistent choices that you make that reflect values that you have over time. If you make choices consistently over time that reflect values that you care about, you'll build an identity that you're very proud of and that you feel comfortable with. So for me at this point, any of you in this room could call me a whore. I don't really care. Like, it's probably not going to sound great. But it's not something that I'm going to be like, oh, that hurts so bad. Because I've spent 8 years doing stuff I'm really, really proud of. I'm totally, by the way, I'm skipping that now. I'm going whole new direction, a few more minutes left. I've built my life into something to be somebody that I'm really proud of based on choices I've made consistently over time. And so that reflect my values that I've chosen, not that the pop culture has like imposed on me. But so for those of you out there that are kids that are growing up, think about like what do you care about? What values are important to you? And then what choices can you make that reflect those? Because if you make choices that don't reflect those values, eventually you will grow up and somebody will be able to call me a whore, and I'll probably burst into tears and cry if I hadn't spent 8 years becoming somebody else. Because you'd be saying something that I feel like was true. And that's all I was, is how I felt at the time. That's all I was. When I was in the industry, 6 years later, if you said I was a whore, I would have burst into tears and like probably wanted to do a whole bunch of bad things to myself because it would have been true and hurt really bad. When I say true, that doesn't mean I'm actually a whore. I understand that I'm not a whore. But that's how when that's what I was doing every day, that's what I felt like I was. So it's unbelievably important that if you do what everyone else does, because that's natural or easy or familiar or acceptable, you're going to become like what society has decided is a life worth living, which I don't personally think that just by default my life is worth living. I think I need to make it like what is it worth to me, and how am I going to make it worth something to me, and how do I, regardless of what I've been through and what's happened to me, how can I respond to every situation that I come across in life in a way that I'm proud of, that I could die today and be proud of how I responded to that situation. So summing all of this up, without sticking to my presentation at all, is the concept that the sex industry is so real. It's so real. Like, for the people that are like, oh, it doesn't happen here, I don't even know what to say, because, like, dude, it's your husband. It's your kids. It's your people. It's all the people that look like you. From my end of the world is all the people's faces I saw on the fridge of the men that I was having sex with. I saw like your family photos on the fridge every day. So it's happening, and it's not that these men are like sick, sadistic, crazy men that like are preying on 4-year-old children. These are just regular men because they think this is normal. Those smiles that are in Grant's slide of the smiling, those smiles, anyone believes them. Somehow our smiles as females are really convincing. But yes, by the way, boys and transgender are in this industry. There's a huge demand nowadays for transgender youth, and transgender youth end up feeling like, oh, at least I belong in this world. So please encourage or encourage your community to be loving and accepting and inclusive of all its people, so that those people don't try to find a sense of belonging somewhere else. Encourage your kids to grow up thinking about what choices they do have, what does sex mean to them. I really think that if sex was just physical, and if the industry was just sex, I would be fine. Like, I wouldn't be traumatized, I wouldn't be messed up for life, because I really think I am. I wouldn't have all the issues. I wouldn't have all the issues I have if it was just sex, because if it was just sex and it was just my body and it was just skin, I could go wash it off. You go clean a toilet, you go wash your hands, you go scrub the floors. I filtered. You go scrub the floors and you go wash your hands. You go give a guy a hand job, you go wash your hands. That's how it was to me. But the thing is, it wasn't just sex that's happening in the sex industry. They're buying the right to, or the ability to, spit on you while you give a blowjob. That's humiliating, sorry. You have to smile and keep going. They have the right to talk all sorts of degrading ways to you while you're doing stuff with them, and you have to smile and keep going. They have the right to go home to their family, who looks like you, and their nice job and their nice community, and go to church the next week or the next Sunday, and my time's up, but they're buying the right to belong in a society where they can even be elected president. But a girl like me who's a whore probably can't someday be president. Like, I'm not accepted in our society. Even if it's my past, it's not my current. I couldn't go into anybody's home and say, this is part of my past, let me sit at your dinner table tonight. That wouldn't work. So I know my time's up. I know I totally got on a different direction, but I feel like my direction was important because I really care about driving home the point that you have choice of what kind of person you are. And if you aren't proud of the person you've been, you have choice from today forward till you die, whenever that is, of what kind of person you are. And cling to that, because choice is a really big deal. There's a lot of things you won't have choice over. We're going to go to my last slide, actually, so you guys can see really quickly how smart I am as I go through all of the other stuff that we missed. Because the last slide it's really hard to get out, by the way. This is the slides about how hard it is to get out of the industry and why. I can send this to people if you want it. Intervention is helping people get out and stay out, helping men not buy. Prevention is really helping men not buy, but so much. Yeah. I don't know how to advance the slide. I don't know if there's someone that can do that, but I feel like I'm almost there. Here we go. Life is not always easy or fair. We do not always get dealt a good hand. Life does not always turn out the way that we planned. We don't have control over everything that we face in life. What we do have control over, driving that point home. What we do have control over is how we respond to every situation we face. We have control as to the kind of person we are, the values we uphold through the various situations we live through. Life can take away everything from us, our loved ones, our possessions, our safety, our bodies, but it can never take away our integrity. It can never take away our values and the reactions that we choose to have. It's these things that we do have control over that makes us who we are. I'm proud of who we are. And on that, I've totally gone over time. Thank you guys for listening and laughing with me.
We want to have James Backstrom come up and introduce himself for about 5 minutes or so. He'll be joining the panel with the other 3 speakers. James is the county attorney for Dakota County, and he's been quite involved in this work. So, Jim, why don't you say a few words?
Well, thank you, everyone, for being here tonight. Thank you for allowing me to be with you this evening. It is a privilege to serve as your county attorney here in Dakota County. And I can tell you, I see a lot of sad things and a lot of terrible things as county attorney, and some of the real tragedies that happen in our community come through my office, unfortunately. And I've seen a lot of tragedy involving human trafficking over the years. And I'll tell you, first of all, I want to thank the speakers that were here tonight, because these were powerful speakers this evening. They were just incredible. So thank you all for being here. And I'll tell you this, even just 5 years ago, I don't think I myself knew the extent of the problem that we have with human trafficking today in this country. I'm learning more about it every day. And I think the vast, vast majority of people who live in our county, in our state, in our nation, the law-abiding citizens of this great country we live in, I don't think anybody has a clue about the extent of this problem. You've learned about it tonight in some very, very vivid terms, and from some great speakers that have unfortunately suffered through some tragedies associated with this industry. But I can tell you, it's a $30 billion a year industry in this country. There's over 300,000 youth that are trafficked for sex every day in America. There are over 8,000 to 12,000 youth and young adults that are trafficked for sex every day in Minnesota. It's happening right here. It's happening in our communities, and it's happening in front of our eyes, and we just don't see it. And we, as I think Jeremy said, we got to open our eyes, and we got to realize what's going on. And he's exactly right. The pornography industry and the information that's out there today is so overwhelming. that it's just extremely frightening for all of us, and we have to understand that what's out there and talk to our kids and our grandkids and work with everybody to try to put a stop to this. So listen, I'm working hard. I was very proud about 3 years ago to get together with John Choi, the Ramsey County attorney who led this effort, and I'm proud to be his partner. But I stood with my colleagues in the metro area here and John as we made the decision that we are no longer going to treat the juvenile victims of human trafficking as criminals. We're going to treat them as the victims that they are. And we did this before there was any laws in place, and we were strongly in support of the laws that are now in place in Minnesota, the first state in America to adopt the safe harbor law concept, which is spreading, thankfully, across this country. And I'm still educating some of my colleagues across America on this issue. Listen, these are victims. We got to do everything we can to help these victims, to get them out of the tragedies and the trauma that they've suffered, get them the help that they need and the counseling and the support that they need. And as Grant Snyder told you, you got to keep going out, unfortunately, time and again to find some of these young victims, but we can't give up. We got to keep fighting for these kids. This isn't okay. It's not something we can live with. This is not life in America as any of us want it. And I'm telling you here today that I'm going to continue to work hard at it as long as I have the privilege to serve in this community as your county attorney. And I know my colleagues across this state believe with me that we can do more about this, and we're going to do more. We're going to continue to work hard to try to put a stop to this and hold accountable the people that are preying on these victims. So thanks for having me tonight.
All right, good. So all the speakers, turn your on switch on. Make sure there's a green light. It should be working. Everyone, just stand up for a minute before we start. You've been sitting for a long time. Stretch yourself. If you have some questions that you want to ask, hearing some of this stuff, can one of you tell us something good that you're seeing happening to give us some hope?
I'll start with that. So I think there's. Can you guys hear me? Is this
Yep.
on?
Yep, it's on.
All right.
Keep talking.
You guys got this?
There we go. Do that.
Thanks. All right, better. Thank you. Of course, they give the most important person on stage the working microphone. I got to tell you, though, I am always, this sort of thing really restores my confidence in humanity. I will tell you, and I know that County Attorney Backstrom probably backs this up. You know, we really live in a world where we wade through these seas of human misery every day, and so being able to connect with people where we do some education, but we also sort of come together around an issue that's so important. You know, we all love these kids, we really do, and there's no, when the county attorney says we're not going to stop fighting for them, we're not going to stop looking for them, I just see a whole lot of hope in all of that, so that's where I find hope.
All right, thanks.
I think mine's on. I've been at 2 conferences this year addressing pornography in America, and they were both really spearheaded by the National Center for Sexual Exploitation, based out of Washington. They've been doing a ton of lobbying, and I'm greatly encouraged by their efforts. I will say this, most of you don't know this, but in 1973, the United States passed a law banning pornography as an obscenity. Anything above a topless woman is illegal. Illegal. $250,000 fine and 5 years in prison. Okay? It's been illegal since 1973. And in 2011, I'm sorry, I'm going to name names because I don't dance around. Eric Holder disbanded the special prosecuting unit that was prosecuting pornographers, and they refused to enforce this law. I met the guy that was prosecuting. Okay, I met that attorney. 120 cases he prosecuted. Do you know how many he won? All of them. It's an open and shut case. We have laws preventing this, and they're not being enforced. And there are voices being raised around the country, one by one, state by state, city by city, addressing these things locally and nationally. And I'm very pleased to be part and partner with a lot of those folks. So there is a consensus now among the pornographers. They're calling us the anti-porn movement. I'm not anti-porn. I'm just pro-human. Okay, there's a big difference. They don't get to name what we are, but we're on their radar now. 85% of the pornography online is produced by one company. They're called MindGeek. I told you I'm going to name names. MindGeek. If you Google them, you'll find them a very friendly tech company. They've been cannibalizing all of the content online, even websites that steal their own professional content. Okay?
All right, Jeremy, since I know you well, I'm going to cut you off here.
Go ahead. Good things.
I know how long you can talk.
I'll just take it.
Thank you.
So the other thing about hope, as simple as this is probably my maternal side coming out. Simple. I'm going to say it naturally because it's important. It's so important. Love your children.
Yeah.
It's like on a hope note, pour love into your children because kids grow up dying, desperate for love and attention.
Yep.
And you may not have all the answers for all the things they're going to go through in life, and I sure don't have all the answers for all the girls that wound up at the ranch. But all I did for the times they were at the ranch was pour my love into them, play cards with them, run around with them, do little silly things with them, play dress up with them, throw them in the shower with all their clothes on and turn the water on. Like, just love them and treat them with that, like, I love that you're alive feeling.
Yeah.
Because then they can live through any trauma.
Right.
Whether it's the sex industry, whether it's drugs, whether it's a friend losing a friend to suicide, they can live through anything. A kid can live through anything. A person can live through anything if they feel like someone gives a darn about them,
Right.
and can sit with them, even if they don't have all the answers.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Big.
Thank you, Haley. That's right. Okay, I just add one thing. I was at a seminar, and John Choi, the Ramsey County attorney, was speaking about this thing, and someone asked him a question. He was just talking about legalese, and the answer he gave to the question of what can we do, he said, dads, love your daughters.
Yeah.
Love your boys. Spend time with them. So I just want to echo what Haley said. That's so important.
Absolutely. You know, one of the things that I take hope from, too, is just the number of outstanding organizations that we have right here in our state. You know, the Trafficking Justice Group that's put this event on tonight, but we have Breaking Free here in Minnesota and working hard every day with the victims of human trafficking, and the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children is a huge resource in this country. You know, and we have people out there like Patty Wetterling. I'll tell you this.
Yeah.
I know Patty Wetterling. She suffered more than just about anybody in this country. And I'll tell you, I still pray for her and her family all the time. But I'll tell you this, she is a resource that cares about kids. And, you know, listen, we can all learn from her and learn great lessons from her and work together to try to do more to prevent this type of
Absolutely.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to ask one more of our planted questions, then we'll get to the ones that were sent in. And for the panelists, just for the sake of time, we'd like to have maybe just one of you answer the question before we get to the next one, so we can get as many questions as possible. I would love to be here until midnight, but I don't think everyone else wants to. If one of my friends tells me about a guy that she met online who she's thinking of seeing, how can I warn her without sounding lame and judgmental?
I don't know. I'm the one that went for that. I said, oh, he's totally talking to me. Let me go see what he wants, blah, blah, blah. So I don't know. I have way smarter things to say than that.
Okay. I want to make it clear that I passed the mic. I was the first one to pass the mic away from myself. It has now landed back here by default. I can only tell you what I would say if it was my daughter, okay, or my son. And I've had this conversation. I'm actually in the middle of a conversation right now with a girl about this that reached out her story of a guy online. I need to help them understand something. There is an innocence to what they're doing at that moment. Any boy that asks you to send him naked pictures or begins sexualizing you is a coward and does not care about you and is not interested in you at all and doesn't see you as anything. And frankly, online, an overwhelming majority of the time, it's someone posing. I had an autistic boy to school last week come and tell me. He said, yeah, an older girl Facebooked me and asked me for nudes. Okay, he's 16. I said, it wasn't a girl. He said, what? I said, it wasn't a girl that asked you. No girl reaches out to a younger boy and asks for nudes. Mm-hmm. It was probably a guy posing as a girl to try and get pictures from you. Yeah. And this light bulb went on his head. He goes, well, I didn't say anything. I said, good job. But that's the first thing I would want. Really, the only thing I would want them to know is I'm trying to help them understand humanity and what someone's trying to get out of them, and that's not something they want, a person they want to know or have in their life.
Yeah. Thank you. Grant, I remember the story you told about a person on Facebook that was approached by a woman, asked to show pictures, eventually was blackmailed with those pictures by a different person who ended up being the same person.
Yep. It's routinely happening in this country. Routinely.
Yeah. So be wary of friends online. That's the question. Okay. Let me get to some of the questions that people have asked here tonight. I'm the mother of an 8, 11, and 13-year-old. How can we possibly keep our kids safe from making choices that might lead them in a wrong direction?
I got this. You can't. Sorry, you can't keep your kids safe from making choices that lead them in the wrong direction. What you can do is when they make those choices, talk to them about how that worked for them. How did that make them feel? How did that make other people feel? What worked about it? What didn't work about it? What needs were you trying to have met? And were those needs met? Are there other ways of getting those needs met? You can't protect your children from the world. You can empower them to survive the world and live through it and be proud of the person they are while they're in it.
We protect them out of love and not out of fear. That's the one thing I would add. Anything we do for our kids, we do because we love them, not because we're afraid of what might happen. I think that's an important mindset.
Yeah. Let me just say that one of the most important things I think you can do to protect your kids is to talk with them, to make sure that they feel comfortable to talk with you, that no topic is a taboo, that you can talk about the concerns that they have in their lives. The open communication, I think, is huge. And as a parent, and you also need to understand what some of these internet sites are out there, that some of these things you've heard about tonight. You need to understand where these things are and talk to your kids about the dangers associated with getting into those types of websites. But anyways, open communication I think is huge and to keeping your kids safe.
Right.
Sorry, I know we're not all supposed to answer the same
Go
question.
ahead.
But
Go ahead.
I do want to say one additional thing, and I agree with everything that the panelists have said, that this is precisely why, though, piggybacking on what Haley just said, that you can't protect your kids from everything. This is why we got to hunt the boogeyman. This is why we have to go after the bad guys, and we have to hunt the people that are out there on the internet and everywhere stalking our kids. And demand is so important. That has to be in the forefront of our mind.
Yep, and we do have some resources, some that Jeremy mentioned, and also at the Trafficking Justice table, just on internet safety. That's something you can do if you have parents in the home that are like Jeremy, that say, hey, we're going to keep things safe, have an open discussion with your children, don't do a thing behind their back. That can be helpful.
It's almost like they gave us the internet, like someone gives you a car and then like doesn't tell you how to drive it. And is like, have fun, man. It goes really fast.
Yeah.
That's a great point.
Why would you do that?
I can tell you, I'm like Jeremy. I have every device that I own in our house, my cell phone, everything is out. I have accountability software on it. I have a friend that gets a report once a week, and he sees what I've been doing, and it's not secret anymore. And I just love that because I am not tempted at all. So there's lots of tools for men, talking about pornography and men, so lots of tools to come out of the closet, come out of the darkness, and teach our boys also to be accountable and have a life of freedom rather than bondage. All right, next message, next question here. Someone wants to know what Backpage is. You guys talked about Backpage. You want to talk to that, Grant?
So Backpage is an online bulletin board. As everybody has probably seen, there's been a lot of attention paid to it. They make what everybody for a long time said was about $27 million a year on their internet ads, and we found out very recently during the arrest that that's on basically one state that they were making that amount of money, and these places, these Backpage ads, they're all over the world. In this particular marketplace and in many others like this, it accounts for about 98% of the juvenile trafficking is associated with Backpage. There was just a story that was released, I think yesterday, it might even have been today, that a judge, ruled that it was unconstitutional, that it was protected First Amendment speech. That
this close to
yeah, so that's basically what Backpage is.
Okay. Next question. If you suspect a youth is a victim but hasn't asked for help, would it be appropriate, how would it be appropriate and respectful to talk to about this with her? Who wants to take that
So I might have a very different perspective than some of the panelists, so I would love to hear all the panelists on this one, or at least Grant. Because I worked at the Girls Ranch where girls didn't want help and they didn't think they had a problem, and I really don't know that there's much success rate, if you want to call it that, helping anyone change. If anyone studies psychology and they know the cycle of change or something, of like what it takes for someone to make a change in behavior, you've got to acknowledge that you don't want the certain behavior in the first place, and then like figure out how to make changes. If you try and get someone to change who doesn't think they have a problem, it's just, I don't know. So what I recommend with people that you think might be in the industry or might be getting exploited or whatnot, and they aren't asking for help, is to continue as strongly as you can and consistently as you can, treating them with love, with kindness, with respect, with humor. Because if they identify you as the person that when I'm around you, I feel good about me. When I'm around you, I'm respected. I know what it feels like to be respected. When I'm around you, I laugh. Then when I get tired of this horrible life that I'm in, then I might come to you because you've treated me so well the whole time I've ever known you. You never changed how you treated me. You never stopped talking to me. You never gave up on me, but you also never like fantasized about what I was doing. You also never got closer to me because you thought it was cool what I was doing. You just kept this like constant, stable, like steadiness while I went all over the place in my life, and you were this always good person. That's what I would say to do to somebody that doesn't want help, because you can try to force all you want, and I don't know that it makes much progress. It's exhausting.
That's fantastic.
Great answer.
Yep.
Yeah. Here's the next question. Well, it's kind of a comment and then a question. Every single high school or middle school needs this information. How can we spread this information to the rest of the schools?
I'll just make one comment. We need advocates in the schools. Any one of us, Grant's probably busier, would be happy to go in. I'm at least able, through an organization in town, I do about 2 schools a week. I get a little bit of time, about 15 minutes, to address pornography. If you know someone in the school, if you work here at this school, if you have an end of the school, a connection, we've got websites, and very soon I'll have a video up of an actual film version of about an hour-long lecture that I do, that she'll be able to give it as a resource. I would be happy to go anywhere, anytime, no joke, and talk about this. So you have some resources on stage, but we need someone on the inside. We do not have the time, okay, to like walk into a school and try and sell ourselves and what we're doing. That was a poor.
Let me tell you bits about it.
Yes. That was like a double entendre. I did not mean it that way. The problem, we need to educate the educators. Okay, I had the privilege of going to a middle school and talking about sexting. You know why? Because the educators finally said, we don't know what to do. We need someone cool to come in and like talk to these kids. They don't listen to us. They're kind of getting to that point now, and it's sad that it took that long. I don't care. We're here now, and there are people that can come in and address these things. So, but we need advocates on the inside to do that, and you need to be aggressive, in politely aggressive in advocating on our behalf.
I would also add, our organization, one of our goals is to get into schools all across the metro area. It's only going to happen if the schools hear from parents that they're concerned. Because a lot of schools are very, very afraid of this topic. I just applaud Apple Valley District and Community Ed for taking the courage to make this event happen. But I was just called into the Shakopee principal's office. I was called to the principal's office early this week. He heard about this event. He couldn't come, but he's very interested. But with me was a parent who had a daughter attending that high school. Me, or I think any of us, going into schools aren't going to have the impact as you have. So if you know friends that have children go to other school districts, if you want to get it in the curriculum, which we think it should be in the curriculum of what used to be called health, maybe it's wellness classes now, that's something that will be parent-led and parent-driven. So raise your voice. All right. Next question. This person has a similar talk back home, and there was some question about numbers. And the bottom line of this question was, can you give us an idea of how severe the local trafficking situation is here in Apple Valley, here in the suburbs, here in the metro area? Maybe, Jim, you want to?
I think Jim gave the number. You said 8,000 to 12,000 in the state of Minnesota.
Yeah.
I don't know that we have them by county.
Yeah.
If we have county numbers, if anybody's even tracking.
I think Grant might be the best to tell us what's going on in the metro area. And listen, thank God we have investigators and law enforcement officers like Grant Snyder and the other folks that he works with on teams throughout the metro area, because these people are dedicated. They're committed. They're committed to making a difference. And he's, as he told you already tonight, he's going to go home. He isn't going home. He's going to work when he leaves here to try to find that young girl. And that's just who he is. Yeah. And thank God we have people like him.
Yeah. Yeah. Amen. Grant, do you have any numbers in your work or any estimates?
One of the ways we measure it, I think, because it's really, really hard to get meaningful numbers. I can tell you that on the average, I get about 13 new referrals a week, and that's 13 new cases that we collect in Minneapolis. That's a fraction of the number throughout the course of the metro, and it's a fraction of the number of actual victims out there because, like Haley just got done saying, a lot of these victims, a lot of these girls, a lot of these boys don't want help. They don't see themselves as a victim. They don't relate to that. And so trying to measure it the biggest way, because Backpage continues to be the real connection, Backpage and Craigslist in this marketplace, the biggest way we measure it, we get on the average of about 225 in this market in Twin Cities, 225 ads a day. That's a ton of ads. That's an awful lot. And with us being out there, if I put out an ad, just one ad to do an operation over an 8-hour day, I'll probably get 150 responses. 150 distinct responses to one ad on one given day. That's a fairly substantial amount, and we craft our ads in such a way that they're very specific to a particular demographic. So I wouldn't say that we could multiply that times 225, but one of the estimates I saw was that on any given day there's about 60,000 people in the metro area that are looking for paid sex. And how they came to that, I've got some issues with their methodology, but that's one estimate.
Okay. This is a question for Haley. Haley, if you feel comfortable answering this question, if not, that's fine. The question was, how did Haley get out of the industry?
I worked really hard at staying out. My mom helped me get out. She said, you can move in with me and go back to college. And I was 25, and I was like, sign me up. So I moved in with her, and that's how I got out. Like, for me, it was that simple. I was not in love with the guy anymore that I was with for those 6 years. That love, like, wore off, and I wasn't in, and just like a drug, you build up a tolerance to. When you have an addiction, you build up a tolerance, it no longer gets you high. That's how it felt, like it no longer did anything for me. And so I didn't have this loyalty that I had built with him. Like, I wouldn't have died for him anymore. And I certainly had no interest in like having a long life with him at all. So at that point, so when my mom offered for me to move in with her, I said yes. However, what helped me stay out? A lot of privilege. I have all my teeth in my mouth. I could get a job. I have an education. I speak a certain way. I look a certain way. I come from a family that's working and has college education, so like I come from so much privilege. Yes, I have bipolar, but I also have a lot of intellectual abilities that I can think through a lot of things and do fine. So that's how I stayed out. I would say I got out because of my mom, and I stayed out because of hard work combined with privilege. Because I don't know that I would have stayed out had I not had all the supports and privileges that I have.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Amen.